Welcome again. In this lab activity or this video, we are going to look at how we can come up with a dynamic array, especially for reading our data from the file, considering that the number of records in our file may change from time to time. So as we saw from previous video, we used fixed number because our file had 80 records, so we were able to create an array with the size of 8, and would use 8 maybe to calculate average etc. But this is not the case because the number of records may change from time to time. These might be students that we have now, but maybe by tomorrow we may have other students entered in the same file, so the number of students or the number of records will actually change. Therefore, it's very important that in such cases, when we want to take data from the file and put that data into a structure, we should use dynamic arrays. And also we want to look at the concept of auto increment, something that I would want you to use in your assignment. So this part of auto increment is of course a concept in the database where you use an integer as an identifier of a record. So here we don't have an identifier for these records. An identifier or a primary key can be like for students can be a student number, but instead of using maybe a student number, what I want is to use a primary key of an integer which will be incremented automatically. That is to say, if we add a new record, that new record should be given an integer, like in this case assuming all the first 8 were given integers which were automatically assigned, then we would have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and if we insert another one, then that other one would take a primary key of 9. So how can we achieve that? These things, for us to come up with the dynamic array and for us to be able to do the auto increment, we need to know how many lines are there in our file, because that will help us to create dynamic array, and that will help us to know the next number that we should assign as a primary key or as an identifier to the record we want to write to the file. So this is very important. We need to know the number of lines in the file. That will help us create this, and that will also help us do this. So let's get started. Here I have my basic file, and I mean my basic program, the one that we've been using before. And this program, I would like to come up with a way of counting how many records are there in my file. So to do so, I'll show you 2 ways, but generally we just need to open the file and loop through the file, counting how many lines of code are there. So you would choose to be to open the file and be reading a line by line and counting how many readings you've done before you reach the end of file. Another approach would be you will be reading a character by character. A line will be determined, or you know that you have reached the end of line if you read the new line character, which is /n. So we can use a /n to know that we have read up to the end of the line, and the next reading will be on the new line. So the moment we have hit /n, which is end of the line, then we can increment our counter until we finish reading all the characters which are there, and this will give us also the number of lines that are available in our program. Let's start with maybe that one of character by character. So here we have our file, and we have linked this file to this object of in, and we want to read all the lines of records that are there. So if we are to use character by character, of course, first thing that we need to have is to have while, which will check whether we have reached the end of the file. So while in.uof is not uof, then something should happen. Then we have what we want to happen here. But we need to have a counter which will be initialized to 0, which will keep on reading or be incremented the moment we are moving from one line of program of record to the next. So inside here we are going to be reading our characters, but the moment we have read a character which is /n, then we should increment our counter. So we can have something like if in this stream in stream has got a method called get, which is used to read a character at a time. So what we are trying to say is our program will reach here and will read that character, and will check if that particular character is actually equal to, we want to check if that character is equal to /n or is actually a new line. If this is the case, then we want our program to increment our counter. Otherwise it will just loop and come back here to read the second or the next character. So this will go all the way up to the end, and by the time we reach the end, we should know how many lines of code we have in our program. Let's test this one together. But okay, after this while, let's just try to have a out statement which will say number of lines is, then we can have our number of lines here, which will be counter. So let's try to see if this one is done correctly and there is no another error. Compile our program. It has compiled without any problem. Then we try to run our program. Okay. Oh, it's showing 194. I think our if statement maybe somewhere is not correct. Let's revisit our program. If what we have read is not, oh no, we are now counting the characters which are not end of line. But we want what we have read to be, if what we have read is a new line, then increment. That's what we wanted. So not equal to, but equal to. Let's compile our program again and run our program. So it's showing that we have 7 lines of code. Let's examine this and why we have 7 probably instead of 8. Yeah, so it's giving us 7 instead of 8 because we have used a new line as our identifier, or the last that's something that will mark the end of the line. So for the last line here, our cursor is here, it's not on a new line, so there's no /n here. If our cursor was down here, we would have been able to have 8 lines, because it means there's a new line here. So we should take note of that, and we can put that into a consideration when we are implementing our solution, to make sure that it is reading properly, depending on how your data is inserted here. If your data is not opening a new line immediately like this, then it's better just to add one to your solution Otherwise, if you are having a new line, you are writing everything and opening a new line like this, then you can use that solution as is. So for now, I've just added a new line here, and I can run my program again. I'll have 8. Okay, so this is how you can count the number of lines in your program. Simple, right? And this number of lines now that you have, or what we know as counter, you can use it to declare a dynamic array, or you can use it even to identify the next primary key, which is auto increment. Okay, let me show you another way you can do this. Apart from counting this one, maybe character by character, you can do this using something different also. I will not take off this code. I'll just show you another method. But for me to show you this method, we should take note that we have already read our file, our stream to the end. So if I'm to start reading our data again, then I need to find a way of taking my cursor back, because by the end of this loop, by the end of this, it means in my file, the cursor has moved from here. It was moving character by character, and now it's here. So if I can have another loop, it will find nothing down here. So I need to move this one here. That's where the issues of random access comes in. So I asked you to go through some random access methods like seekg and seekp. So seekg for reading our data. If we're just reading our data, we use seekg, and seekp if you want to write our data. So I just want to reset the pointer of the cursor and use a different method and see if we are going to get similar result. Okay, let's take okay, let's reset our method first. So in this stream of in, we can use seekg, and you can say 0 to take it back to the beginning, or you can even add something here as ios.back, not dot, I mean ios.back, like that. This is also acceptable. This one will take us back to the beginning, and now we can read our statements again to know how many characters are there. Okay, now to do so, we need to have okay, we can use the same counter, the one which we declared there. We just initialize it to 0. So our counter equals 0. Then we can declare string, maybe just call it line, and we can use the following to count how many are there. So we're going to say string, and we'll use a method which we call getLine, and this method of getLine, we supply it with our stream, which is in, and because we have this one will be reading a line one at a time, and we want that line which has been read to be put into a string variable called line. So this is our loop. It will be getting one complete line at a time, and immediately we may want to, anyway, we can put these ones. Immediately we would want to increment this one. So by the end of this loop, we should be able to have the number of lines from our program. So I'll just repeat this statement here to see what we are going to have. Before running our program, I've modified it here to make sure that the other line here appears on a separate line. So this one is what we already had, and it showed 8, and we want to have a similar statement on a separate line and see if it will show the same. So of course here you can use big, or you can just have 0, doesn't matter, it's the same thing. But after you have gone through the first loop, which made our cursor to go up to the end of file, for us to go back to the beginning of the file, or to use the SIG, it's very important that we clear the marking that was made, because after reaching the end of the file, the SIG doesn't work as the file is marked to be at the very end, and we cannot move up and down again. So we clear the markings that are there using the clear method. Then we can have our SIG to take it back to the beginning. Then after that, we've had this statement which just reset the counter, and we had a statement line, which declaration of a line, which will help us to read line at a time using getLine method here. Then we just counted or increased our counter whenever we managed to read a line. So by the end of this loop, we should have the number of counters or the number of lines displayed here. So let's compile our program and let's run our program. So as we can see, we are able to get the same number of lines using both methods. So it's up to you to see which method you think is more appropriate for you. You can use the first one, which is reading character by character, or you can use the second one, which is reading line by line. Doesn't matter. The main purpose of this is for us to get how many lines of code are there, because it's after that, after we have gotten the number of lines, that we can use that number to declare dynamic array. So I'll now show you how we can declare a dynamic array now that we have the value, we have the number. Of course, I've used the counter, but you can use something more meaningful that you can use it throughout your program. For example, you would use, instead of a counter, you would use maybe number of lines, or the file size, which in our case, the file size will be taken as number of lines. So it's up to you to see what will be the appropriate data type, or the variable name that you would want to use. But in our case, we are using counter. So if we are to declare a variable of a structure or an array of a structure, then we will have our structure here, which in our case is student, and maybe we can give it st, and this is a pointer because we are now dynamically using that. As you can see, I'm using new. Then you have your student here, and after student you specify the size, and our size is a counter in this case. So this one is now declaring the counter, the dynamic array. So when there's a change in our file size, we'll be able to have the same reflected here. Okay, so that's how you can do that. After this declaration, of course, the rest of the code, if we are to use the previous code that we had, the rest of the code, where is my code? Okay, so after declaration here, the rest of the code is the same. So you can repeat this code. It will be able to actually read our code from the system, and we can do whatever we want to do. Just maybe to make sure that it's making sense, I'm going to copy some code from here and demonstrate what I'm trying to mean. I'll take this particular function and put it here. So we have this function that we needed to use to just demonstrate that we are able now to use the dynamic allocation. Then we can have our code. Okay, we can just have our code up to here. I'm going to modify that one. So we can have our code all the way here. Here we are using count as our size. And do we have any other press to change? I think no. So this program should be able to run and give us the average of those 8. Let's try to okay, we have an issue. What's the matter? Okay, okay, I did not copy the structure from here, so there's a structure up here which we needed to also copy. Just want to see that dynamic memory allocation is actually working. Okay, so we can compile our program as I can compile my program here, and I can run my program, and let's see. Okay, let me see. So it's showing me 0. I know the reason. Of course, first of all, let me correct here. And another reason why I'm getting 0 is because I've not, after this loop, it means I'm back to the end of the file. And when I come here, this one will be false in the first place. So we're not going to read anything. So it's important for me to actually repeat what I did here to have a SIG for this one. This is because I'm using the same in throughout. So before going through this loop, I should take it back to the beginning. Okay, now I have my correct code. Okay, so this is for a file size or a file with the 8 line of codes, and we can increase the number of lines for our file. Let's see where our file is. Okay. So this is our file, and I just want to repeat some statements, or I can just get these. I'm getting these 4 and putting them at the very end here. So we have 4. We should have a size of 12, and this will increase even the average. Probably, maybe it will go down, I'm not sure, but it will change the average. So if we run this one, we see that the line of code, or the lines in our program, in our file, now has increased to 12, and our average hasn't changed much. Okay, so our average is still 39. Let me try to change some values and see, or just adding some more lines. So I've changed here and here and here and here. Just make sure that the average probably changes. So if I compile this program and run again, I should have average which has changed, and now we have about 16 records from our file. So we are able to have a dynamic array because of that. We are able to read the number of lines of our file dynamically. Okay, so we are able to use that, and of course these the pieces of code like this one, you can have this piece of code as a function, or if you have chosen to use the second one, then you can have this piece of code as a function somewhere, where it will be returning the size. So maybe let's just try to take these pieces of code and put somewhere as a function. I can just take any one of them. Maybe I'll just take this. I can take this and have it as a function here, and this function is going to return integer. Maybe we'll just say file lines as the name of the function, and this one will be receiving if stream. I'll just call it in again, and our program is going to be here. So this will help us to get the number of lines. Like that. So that's our function. So we can take off this. We don't need this. And we don't need all this part of code. Here we can just now call our function, which is file lines, and we can send our in to that function. Okay, so we'll be able to get the number of lines from that function, and we can use that one to actually declare our dynamic array here. Okay, so here let's remember to put this one as a reference parameter and not as a variable, as a value parameter. So we have changed here, and also make sure this one is declared here as an integer. Should not have it just count equals 0, but as an integer. If these things are in place, then we can compile our program. It's compiled, then we can try to run our program. So it says it has got 16 lines and the average is 50.18, blah blah blah. So this program works as before. It's able to count these lines which we have here, 16, and return the same. Yeah, so we can leave this video here. We've covered the first two. I'll demonstrate the incrementing probably ID automatically in a separate video, but it will be a continuation of the same. We have dynamic array created because we're able to have the number of lines counted dynamically from the file. So the same concept will be extended to auto increment ID. Thank you.